What happens when Hollywood's most beloved action hero sits down for what should be a simple interview and ends up in the most explosive confrontation daytime television has ever witnessed? Today, we're diving into the moment that shocked millions of viewers and left one of television's most outspoken hosts storming off her own show in complete humiliation. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story is absolutely wild. The View studio was buzzing with its usual energy as the cameras prepared to roll for another episode. Joy Behar sat at the iconic table, shuffling her notes with that familiar smirk she wore whenever she was particularly excited about tearing into a guest. Harrison Ford had been booked to promote his latest film. What should have been a routine celebrity interview that the show's producers expected to be smooth sailing. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the legendary Harrison Ford. Whoopi Goldberg announced, as the audience erupted in applause. Ford walked out with his characteristic casual confidence, waving to the crowd before taking his seat across from the panel. His weathered face carried that trademark half-smile that had charmed audiences for decades. "Harrison, welcome back to The View," Sarah Haynes said warmly. "It's always such a pleasure to have you here." "Thanks for having me," Ford replied in his familiar gravelly voice, settling into his chair. "Though, I have to say, I'm always a little nervous sitting at this table. You ladies have quite the reputation for asking the tough questions." The audience chuckled, but Joy Behar leaned forward with a gleam in her eye that suggested she was about to prove his point. "Speaking of tough questions, Harrison, I have to ask about your recent comments regarding environmental activism. You've been pretty vocal about climate change, yet you own multiple aircraft and fly them regularly. Isn't that a bit hypocritical?" Ford's smile faded slightly, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Well, Joy, I think that's a fair question, but it's also a bit more complex than you're making it sound. I use my aircraft for conservation work, transporting researchers and supplies to remote areas where we're doing environmental monitoring. It's not exactly weekend joy rides." "Oh, please," Joy scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "That's what every wealthy celebrity says when they get called out for their carbon footprint. You're telling me Harrison Ford, with all his resources, couldn't find more environmentally friendly ways to support conservation?" The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Sunny Hostin shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Alyssa Farah Griffin's eyes widened slightly. This wasn't the playful banter they'd expected. Ford straightened in his chair, his voice taking on a steelier edge. "Actually, Joy, I've been doing conservation work for over 30 years. I've put my money where my mouth is, funded countless projects, and yes, sometimes that requires getting to places where there are no roads or commercial flights. But I appreciate your concern for my carbon footprint." "Concern?" Joy laughed, but there was an ugly edge to it. "I'm not concerned. I'm calling you out. You Hollywood types are all the same, preaching to the rest of us about saving the planet while you live in your mansions and fly around in private jets. It's virtue signaling at its finest." The audience had gone completely silent. Even Whoopi, who usually maintained control of these situations, seemed stunned by Joy's aggressive tone. Ford's eyes had gone cold, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades of experience dealing with difficult people. "I think you have me confused with someone else, Joy. I don't live in a mansion. I live on a ranch in Wyoming, where I do actual conservation work. I don't fly around in private jets for fun. I use aircraft as tools for my work. But more importantly, I don't come on television shows to attack people I've never met and know nothing about." Joy's face flushed red, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "Oh, I've been in this business longer than most people have been alive, Harrison. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and what I'm talking about is hypocrisy." "No," Ford said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "What you're talking about is making assumptions and attacking someone based on those assumptions. That's not journalism, that's just mean-spirited." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Joy's mouth opened and closed for a moment, clearly not expecting to be called out so directly. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. Mean-spirited? Joy finally sputtered. I'm asking legitimate questions about environmental responsibility. If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't come on talk shows. Ford leaned back in his chair, studying Joy with the same intensity he'd once brought to interrogating suspects as Indiana Jones. I can handle tough questions just fine, Joy. What I have trouble with is rudeness disguised as journalism. There's a difference between asking hard questions and being deliberately hostile. Hostile? Joy's voice rose an octave. You think I'm being hostile? I'm being real. I'm being honest. Something this town doesn't see enough of. Being real, Ford repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. Is that what you call interrupting your guest, making accusations without facts, and generally behaving like you have some personal grudge against someone you've never met? The audience was completely captivated now, watching this verbal duel unfold with the kind of fascination usually reserved for car crashes. Joy's face had gone from red to purple, and her hands were clenched on the table. I don't have a grudge against you, she said through gritted teeth. I have a problem with celebrities who think they can lecture the rest of us, while living completely different lives. And I have a problem, Ford said calmly, with talk show hosts who think they can attack their guests and call it entertainment. The silence that followed Ford's words was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in the studio as the weight of his accusation settled over the table. Joy's eyes flashed with something dangerous, and when she spoke again, her voice had taken on a venomous quality that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. Attack? She hissed. You think this is an attack? You clearly don't know what real journalism looks like, Harrison. Maybe you've been in Hollywood so long that you're used to everyone kissing your feet and telling you how wonderful you are. Ford's eyebrows raised slightly, and there was a flicker of something that might have been amusement in his eyes. Actually, Joy, I've been doing interviews for over 40 years, and I can tell the difference between a journalist asking tough questions and someone who's just looking for a fight. Right now, you're looking for a fight. I'm looking for honesty, Joy shot back, her voice getting shriller by the second. Something that seems to be in short supply when celebrities come on these shows. You want to talk about your little conservation work? Fine. Let's talk about the fuel consumption of those planes you're so proud of flying around. Joy, Whoopi finally interjected, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Maybe we should... No. Joy cut her off without even looking in her direction. I'm not done. Harrison, how much fuel does one of your aircraft burn in a single flight? Do you even know? Do you care? Ford studied her for a long moment before responding. A Cessna 180 burns about 12 gallons per hour, if you're really interested in the specifics. My larger aircraft, which I use for longer conservation missions, burns more. But it also allows me to transport equipment and personnel that would otherwise require multiple vehicles or be completely inaccessible. But something tells me you're not really interested in the actual details. Oh, I'm very interested, Joy said with a nasty smile. 12 gallons per hour. That's more than most people use in their cars in a week. And you're out there lecturing people about their environmental impact? I'm not lecturing anyone, Ford replied evenly. I work with conservation organizations. I fund environmental research. And yes, sometimes that work requires transportation. But I'm curious, Joy. What's your environmental footprint? How did you get to work today? The question clearly caught Joy off guard. That's not the point, she stammered. I'm not the one going around giving speeches about climate change. Actually, Ford said with a slight smile, that is exactly the point. You're criticizing me for something you know nothing about, while admitting you don't hold yourself to the same standards. That sounds like the real hypocrisy here. Joy's face contorted with rage. Don't you dare turn this around on me. I'm not the one sitting there pretending to be some environmental saint while burning through fossil fuels like there's no tomorrow. Environmental saint? Ford's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. Joy, I've never claimed to be perfect. I've never claimed to be a saint. I'm just someone who cares about conservation and puts my time and money into supporting it. But you seem determined to paint me as some kind of villain because I use tools to do that work. Tools? Joy laughed bitterly. Is that what we're calling private aircraft now? Tools? A saw is a tool, Ford said patiently. A hammer is a tool. A vehicle is a tool. An aircraft is a tool. They're all devices that help you accomplish a task. The question is whether the task is worth the cost. In my case, the work I do has helped protect hundreds of thousands of acres of wilderness and countless species. I'm comfortable with that math. I'm comfortable with that math, Joy repeated mockingly. How convenient. I bet you're comfortable with a lot of things when you can afford to be. The other hosts were now looking genuinely distressed. Sarah Haynes was fidgeting with her cards. Sunny Hostin was staring at the table, and even Whoopi seemed at a loss for how to handle Joy's increasingly erratic behavior. You know what, Joy? Ford said, his patience finally showing signs of strain. I came here to talk about a movie. I came here to have a conversation with intelligent people about work that I care about. I didn't come here to be ambushed by someone who seems to have a personal vendetta against people who actually try to make a difference in the world. Vendetta? Joy's voice cracked slightly. You think this is personal? This isn't personal. This is principle. This is about calling out the hypocrisy that runs rampant in Hollywood. No, Ford said firmly. This is personal. This is you. Taking out whatever frustrations you have on someone who's done nothing to deserve it. And frankly, it's beneath the dignity of this show and everyone else at this table. The camera caught the exact moment when Joy's composure completely shattered. Her face went white, then red, then white again. When she spoke, her voice was shaking with barely controlled fury. How dare you, she whispered. How dare you come into my workplace and lecture me about dignity? You don't know me. You don't know what I've accomplished. You don't know anything about what I've done for this industry. You're right, Ford acknowledged. I don't know you personally, but I know what I've seen here today, and what I've seen is someone who invited a guest onto their show and then spent the entire time trying to humiliate him. That's not the behavior of someone who cares about this industry or this show. Joy stood up so abruptly that her chair rolled backward into the set piece behind her. That's it, she said, her voice now loud enough that it echoed slightly in the studio. I don't have to sit here and listen to this from some washed-up action star who thinks he's better than everyone else. The audience gasped audibly. Ford remained seated, but his expression had hardened considerably. Washed up, he repeated slowly. Well, that's certainly professional. Professional? Joy was now gesticulating wildly, all pretense of television composure abandoned. You want professional? Professional would be admitting that you're a hypocrite, instead of sitting there acting like you're some kind of environmental hero while you burn through more fuel in a month than most people use in a year. Joy, Whoopi said urgently. Maybe I should what? Joy snapped, whirling on Whoopi. Maybe I should sit here and let this guy insult me on my own show? Maybe I should pretend that everything is fine while he talks down to me like I'm some kind of amateur? Ford finally stood up, his full height adding gravity to his words. Nobody's talking down to you, Joy. But if you can't have a civil conversation with your guests, maybe you should reconsider whether this is the right job for you. The words hit Joy like a physical blow. Her face went through a rapid succession of emotions: shock, rage, humiliation, and finally something that looked almost like panic. When she found her voice again, it came out as a strangled shriek that made several audience members visibly flinch. Reconsider whether this is the right job for me? She screamed. I've been doing this job since before you knew what a talk show was. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, Nobel Prize winners. I don't need some aging movie star telling me how to do my job. Ford's expression remained unnervingly calm in contrast to Joy's hysteria. Then maybe you should start acting like someone who's interviewed presidents, instead of someone who's having a public meltdown on live television. The studio fell into complete chaos. Joy's mouth opened and closed several times, producing only incoherent, sputtering sounds. The other hosts looked absolutely mortified, with Sarah Haynes covering her face with her hands and Sunny Hostin staring in horror at her colleague's complete breakdown. Public meltdown? Joy finally managed to croak out. Public meltdown? You think this is a meltdown? You haven't seen anything yet, buddy. You come on here with your holier-than-thou attitude, acting like you're some kind of saint because you fly around in your little airplanes pretending to save the world. Joy, please. Whoopi attempted one more time to intervene, but Joy was beyond reason now. No, Whoopi, Joy snarled without taking her eyes off Ford. This man needs to hear what I really think about his fake environmental activism and his condescending attitude. You want to know what I think, Harrison? I think you're a fraud. I think your whole conservation act is just a publicity stunt to make yourself feel better about your privileged lifestyle. Ford tilted his head slightly, studying Joy as if she were some fascinating but dangerous specimen. You know what's interesting? Joy, in all of this ranting, you haven't asked me a single question about the actual work I do. You haven't shown any interest in learning about the organizations I support or the projects I've funded. You've just made assumption after assumption based on nothing but your own prejudices. Prejudices? Joy's voice reached a pitch that was almost painful to hear. My prejudices? You're the one who came in here acting like you're too good to answer legitimate questions about your hypocrisy. I answered every question you asked. Ford replied quietly. I gave you specific numbers, explained the work I do, and tried to have an actual conversation. But you weren't interested in my answers. You just wanted to attack someone. And I happened to be the person sitting in the guest chair. Joy was trembling now, whether from rage or something else entirely. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can come in here and make me look bad on my own show. Joy, Ford said with something that might have been genuine concern in his voice. You're making yourself look bad. I'm just sitting here trying to have a conversation. That was apparently the final straw. Joy let out a sound that was part scream, part sob, and pointed a shaking finger at Ford. I don't have to take this. I don't have to sit here and be insulted by some washed-up has-been who thinks he's better than everyone else because he can afford to play environmental warrior. Joy, Whoopi said desperately, rising from her chair. Maybe we should take a break and... No. Joy cut her off savagely. No break. I'm done. I'm done with this interview. I'm done with this disrespectful guest. And I'm done with this show. The studio went dead silent except for the sound of Joy's heavy breathing. Ford remained standing, his expression unreadable as he watched this complete professional meltdown unfold before millions of viewers. You're done with the show? Sarah Haynes asked in a small voice, clearly hoping she'd misunderstood. Yes, Joy declared, her voice now taking on a manic quality. I quit. I'm not going to sit here and be treated like this on my own show. If this is the kind of guest we're booking, if this is the kind of respect I can expect after decades in this business, then I'm out. But, she began ripping off her microphone with shaking hands, the feedback creating an awful screeching sound that made everyone in the studio wince. You can find yourself another host, she announced to no one in particular. Someone who's willing to put up with arrogant celebrities who think they can come on here and humiliate the people who made them famous in the first place. Joy, Whoopi tried one more time. Please don't do this. Let's just nothing. Joy snapped, throwing her microphone onto the table with a loud clatter. I'm done. 30 years in this business, and this is what I get. Disrespect from some guy who thinks flying around in airplanes makes him an environmentalist. Ford finally spoke, his voice cutting through Joy's hysterics with quiet authority. "Joy, I never disrespected you. I disagreed with you. I defended myself when you attacked me, but I never disrespected you. If you can't tell the difference between those things, then maybe this really isn't the right job for you." The words seemed to hit Joy like a physical blow. For a moment, she stood there, swaying slightly, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Then, without another word, she turned and walked off the set, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence of the studio. The camera stayed on the remaining hosts, who sat in shell-shocked silence for several long seconds. Ford slowly sat back down, straightening his jacket as if nothing unusual had happened. "Well," Whoopi finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "this is live television for you." Ford looked directly into the camera, his weathered face serious but calm. "I want to apologize to the viewers for what just happened. That wasn't my intention when I came here today. I just wanted to talk about my work and maybe clear up some misconceptions. I hope people will look into the actual conservation efforts happening around the world rather than getting caught up in personality conflicts." Sarah Haynes nodded numbly. "Thank you for staying professional through all of that, Harrison." "Sometimes," Ford said with a slight smile, "the most professional thing you can do is just tell the truth and let people make their own decisions about what they've seen." And that's how one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history came to an end, with Harrison Ford sitting calmly at the view table while Joy Behar's career imploded in real time before millions of shocked viewers. What did you think of Harrison Ford's handling of this incredible situation? Subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments whether you think he was too harsh or if Joy Behar finally got what was coming to her after years of treating guests poorly.